What
Hi.
is happening in the land of European VC this week? There's lots of stuff. I've got lots of stuff. We are going to start with, Mads, my good man, we're going to start with, well, I want to start with one of mine, which is this AI Perplexity 8 billion valuation. And if memory serves, they've only got about 50 odd million users doing in the low millions of revenue. So this is mega massive. Is this just AI fluff, do you reckon? What's going on with Perplexity?
Controversial take. I don't really get it. Well, let me peel back. I get it and I don't, because it's a beautiful product and it solves a real problem. But that's a problem that now has been solved by others as well. I just don't see how they beat Google, to be honest. I know there's not much they can do in Perplexity that you can't do with Google today.
But will they take a chunk out? Will this go into that DOJ breaking up? Could we layer this in? Look,
Okay, then all bets are off. You're absolutely right. If Google is killed, then all bets are off.
Hey, listen, I can't see a world where it's in anyone's interest to kill off Google, but it might be a counter from Google to say, hey, listen, don't look at us. Look, there, this is what's going on in the world of search. So there might be something. I know. I saw another report that today that Perplexity are doing a deal with the Wall Street Journal to get around some of the copyright issues. So they're obviously working angles, and maybe there's more juice to be had. It just feels quite small and quite lowbrow for that kind of valuation, that kind of raise. 1 billion and 8, baby. I wouldn't mind being on that cap table. Right, staying with AI and staying with the big foundational crew. So Anthropic, not particularly European VC focused, I grant you, but Anthropic's new AI model can control your PC. Should we be scared, Mads?
Terrified.
It doesn't feel like it's not something that we haven't seen before, but it feels like the power that's weighted behind the control.
It's next gen. It's natural evolution. Yeah. I think enterprises might think twice before letting that loose inside their firewalls. Security implications are obvious.
Yeah.
But of course, it's what's going to happen. Look, we've been on the robotic process automation path for many years. Companies like hAIpe, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, and others have done kind of very static automation. You run a script of playing back, clicking on certain buttons, and filling out forms. And companies have paid a lot of money for that, right? And Accenture and the likes have earned a lot of money implementing these solutions. And this is just totally next level. It's kind of combine RPA with an LLM, and there you go. So it makes perfect sense. It's natural evolution, and this is going to be just one more step towards kind of this AI-powered future we see in enterprise.
So Dave no longer needs to turn up. Forget hybrid working. Dave's got his AI agent sorting everything out, chatting to your AI agent, and
there you go,
fixing the world. Reading the reports, it doesn't look like it's all that supremely useful just yet, and maybe this is in reaction to Salesforce now shifting into Agentforce, and maybe there's a little bit of this kind of push to say, hey, we're here too, we're doing clever stuff on the desktop too. So maybe that's something that's
all these things will start as toys.
Yeah, I bet this looks and feels like it's an interesting direction to have. I mean, I'm assuming this is mainly going to be a coding tool. So if I can work out how to build and code as a co-pilot, but we'll see. Let's see what happens. Okay, so I've always wondered why, if I'm on the NHS, why can I not have my medical records? And there's been a bit of noise on the social web that the NHS app will now allow you to host your own patient records. You can have your own patient records which makes complete logical sense. Now, what I didn't realize was this is a Palantir product. And my question for us and the room was more around, is there any angle for the startup community to get involved in building the services that run the NHS? Because every time I've seen a top-down service like this try to be implemented anywhere in the NHS, it's failed. And obviously Palantir are running the gig, which upsets me. Why could we not do this within our own four walls? But do you think there are any opportunities here for smaller firms to get involved?
It's so interesting. Yeah, I saw earlier that in many ways, one of the most frequently used communication tools inside the NHS today is, do you know what it is?
Fax machine.
Well, that number 2 on the list.
Aren't they? Isn't the NHS the only buyer of faxes in the UK? No, I don't. I
Quite,
don't know what's number
quite
two.
possible.
I don't know
It's
what's that.
WhatsApp.
No.
Yes,
Oh, great. Okay.
medical staff uses WhatsApp to communicate about patients.
Wonderful. Who doesn't want Zuckerberg having more patient data that they don't say they're touching, but
To be fair, I think WhatsApp is probably better encrypted than any other NHS or government platform for that matter I can think of.
yeah.
But it just begs the question of why is that where we default? I mean, it just feels like a kind of lowest common denominator almost. Isn't there a better way? You think about how you can use, if you have all the data, if you use all the data in the right way, how much you can enhance the NHS efficiency. We've got this huge behemoth and we just keep pouring money into, and it's like this big black hole and things don't get better. And there's more money and things just don't get better. And then what we have on the other hand, this absolutely revolutionizing technology, and we're still relying on fax machines and WhatsApp on a good day. And it's just like something doesn't quite make sense.
Well, maybe we'll forgive Palantir for getting involved. I think even though they spent way too much money, they did a reasonable job on the COVID stuff and the rollout. And I get that it was way too much money for what it was, but actually, technically, I was. Even though the use case didn't really work, but we've never had a pandemic like it. So, but I thought it was actually not a disastrous rollout. I was very surprised that they managed to achieve what they can achieve.
Yeah.
It does. Go, go,
But
go.
the last time there was a huge program to try and revitalize the NHS using IT was the NP-FIT, right? The national program for IT
Yeah.
that was rolled out over New Labour in the noughties. And it was just an abject disaster. The way the government procurement process ran, the way they split up the regions, many of the big providers ended up no bidding. They're like, nobody's ever going to make money doing this. And some of the firms that ended up winning then totally tanked the projects. And it was just a disaster. And billions were wasted on absolutely no productivity improvement. So you have this huge, as you say, these huge problems with these top-down procurement processes. And wouldn't it be better if we could adopt technologies bottom-up, having a more agile approach, right? Instead of saying, now let's invest, 20 billion pounds in trying to transform everything in one go, let's try and take snippets and pilot different approaches and then see what works and lean into that.
I've never understood why they don't just create the frameworks and say, hey, market, here's the framework for what we're trying to achieve. You provide the tooling and then we'll open a marketplace for the best and the brightest. It just feels like it's a framework play rather than a top down, here we're going to impose X absolutely useless system. But it leans into the state of play now. A lot of companies do bring your own kit. So maybe the NHS will be whatever you have, there'll be an infrastructure that can load it on. Let's see where they end up. What have we got up next? So this I thought was really interesting. So I'm reading on CB Insights. So Stripe, HubSpot and JP Morgan are buying audiences by acquiring media companies. Now, my immediate thought when I saw this article and this research paper was, is there an angle? Because we work with many founders who are doing offline events. Obviously, they're doing their online community building. They're building their offline communities. And I'm not saying that any of our founders can go out and buy a media company, but it just feels like this is a really smart thing to do, is to go and buy either the immediate or the adjacent audiences to the people that you want to serve or the people that you want to be aligned with. Have you got any thoughts on this?
I think it leans into the whole notion of the creator economy and of media and audiences and content as the primary next generation marketing vehicle. We're invested in companies that work in this space. We know how much better it is to acquire, new customers using content than just to buy ads. And so I think it leans into that. Absolutely. I think that's just a general trend. The next generation businesses are fundamentally content businesses because that's what we want. We want content. We don't just want a dumb ad, right?
I was at an event yesterday for VCs and LPs, and Stefan from Creandum was talking about venture capital, and someone in the audience was asking about, what's important about building a VC firm, and he basically just said brand. And I think it leans into, and you can break that down in a multitude of ways. We won't go into that now, but I think it does come down into this whole content creator economy. But I'm always intrigued about how many more yards there are left on the field. We're already hyper connected and everybody is a creator. And I'm wondering within that noise what the next evolution will be for people like us building a VC firm, what levers will pull. I'm sure AI will be a part of that. Right. So Noah Smith, how long can we sustain economic growth is next on the docket. And his byline was thinking about the very long term. So what was on your mind with this?
No, I mean, it leans into something we've talked about before in terms of, growth and how do you create growth and how do you invest and, what is it that create the wealth we all eventually want to create so that we can build successful and flourishing societies. Something that's sometimes said by people that are very well-meaning is, listen, this whole notion of growth is stupid because perpetual growth in a world with finite resources doesn't make sense. And so we can't keep growing. So we have to find other ways to make our economies work. And I think what Noah, he did very well in the article is he sort of takes that notion a little bit apart by saying, listen, the way we create growth today is not just by mindlessly consuming more resources. We've just talked about content. We've just talked about the creator economy. Now, if somebody creates, writes a book or creates a painting or, music or a podcast, you can create things that will add, millions or hundreds of millions to our GDP and our wealth as a society, but without consuming very many resources at all. And we know this because what we invest in is business technology that enhances efficiency of companies. And so much of it is about enabling businesses to make more with less. And so in many ways, kind of the notion that there is a limit to growth, I think it's a fallacy. Growth is infinite. There's nothing we can't create with human ingenuity. And you can get into kind of resources and fossil fuels and all these things. Look, these are almost solved problems from a technical perspective. Yes, it's going to be another decade or two until we have fixed the energy problem on a global scale. But again, this is something we will fix. I just thought he very eloquently outlined all the sort of the scientific and the rational arguments that are underpinning this argument of why growth is a great thing and why we'll continue to enjoy it for the foreseeable future.
Well, listen, even if he's got it wrong, Elon Musk will save us. He's going to go and mine some asteroids, get us some more raw materials. We've got it all fixed, so we don't have to worry about a thing, right?
There's that too.
I want to stay positive. So Dario Amodei, from the CEO of Anthropic, has written a really lovely paper called The Machines of Loving Grace. So it's very easy in today's news cycle to get caught in the doom and horror and horrificness of humanity and everything that we do to each other. And there is a lot of bad noise around AI, and it's going to steal all the jobs, and it's going to take over the world, and it's going to destroy society as we know it. None of which I think are true. So Dario's written a paper. It's a really lovely read, and I highly recommend it. Called The Machines of Loving Grace. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but he's talking about how do we avoid this perception of propaganda, but also avoid grandiosity and the sci-fi, this whole sci-fi baggage he goes on in to talk about. And then he goes into these 5 distinct areas where AI is going to make a massive leap forwards: biology, health, neuroscience, economic development, peace, governance, and work and meaning. And it's funny how he bundles those two together. And I thought it was really real and thoughtful and considered. Next up, we've got one of yours. So Europe should take a digital leap across its innovation gap. I don't think this goes into much more than we have said a million times. But what were the key aspects that really caught your eye on this one?
No, I think exactly. I mean, it leans back into something we've talked about before and how important it is that we lean into technology and invest in technology as a way to create the next economy for us. We have been relying on kind of legacy industries. Automotive has been such an important part of our economy, but we can see all the challenges our automotive sector faces globally on the EVs and the manufacturing side, efficient manufacturing side from China, on the technology and self-driving side from autonomous vehicle side from California. And so we're going to get caught between a rock and a hard place if we just lean back on how can we produce slightly better, gasoline-powered cars. And the only way really to get back on the front foot is to invest more in technology. It leans into something else we've talked about a lot, which is how can we get more money into venture capital in Europe? How can we back more founding teams to go and create the businesses of tomorrow? And we need more capital because we need to make bigger swings. We can't just rely on us making, bets at the early stage, and then those companies growing up and migrating off to the US and effectively ultimately benefiting the American economy. It has to be, we have to be able to go the whole way and enable those businesses to stay here. And it's so interesting when you look at the difference between the rules for pension funds, pension trustees in the US and Canada versus in Europe. Whereas in Europe, you have all the areas around fee caps and prudent man rules and all these things that constrain and hem in the ability of pension funds to invest. And so what we seem to keep doing is we try to address the symptoms of that. We've been trying to address the symptoms of that in the UK with this new long-term asset fund approach that's been implemented, but it's addressing symptoms rather than the root cause. And so I think we have to try and unlock some of that capital if we want to make a step change here. So I'm hoping that rises back up to the top of the agenda. I think it's so important.
Yeah, noises have been made, as in a government and regulatory level and at EU level. So at least that conversation is happening. But I think it's also worth pointing out that it looks like, and we spoke about this last week, that the UK is looking to raise 12 billion into venture capital this year, which is more than the heady peak of 21. So hopefully that's a good start for the UK. There'll be more coming from Europe, and we can hopefully start to open up more funding channels and get some real stuff coming in. Next up, we've got Europe's lagging tech sectors. So this was a Chicago Booth report. This was one of yours, Mads. It's got all kinds of facts and figures here. Productivity, workload per hour, energy prices, EU compared to the States. It's fairly comprehensive in thinking, although that's quite a short report. What was on your mind with this one?
I mean, it's exactly a continuation of the same topic. We need to fix energy. We need to have cheap and stable energy because that's essential in the digital industries we want to compete in.
Do you think that's number one? Do you think that's the first thing that we should solve? Energy?
I think it's always difficult when you have a system that needs to be addressed to just try and optimize one thing. We have to fix energy and we have to fix capital.
And regulation.
But I think the regulation is how you fix these other things, right? It's the regulation that needs to be fixed so we can actually build energy generation and distribution, and so that we can raise more capital. That's the key for us, I think, to make a step change.
Do you think we have the political will? Do you think Starmer and Reeves will do it from our side? Do you think the EU? Do you think Draghi has had any impact on the EU?
He's had an impact on what's being talked about. The challenge is you still have a fairly tortuous process to pass new acts, to pass new directives, and really to change European legislation and regulation. It's a long, long road. So, we'll know in 2 years maybe whether there is a real impact. And then it might take even longer for things in the fullness of time to be rolled out. It's clear that we've started in the wrong place. Kind of the regulation around the the artificial intelligence regulation, some of the ways GDPR was implemented. It's just some of that stuff is not helping us grow. And we desperately need to grow now. We don't have the luxury of leaning back and saying, well, let's shuffle the deck chairs over here and rearrange a bit and making things a bit prettier because wouldn't it be nice? We desperately need growth.
I'm hoping that the thoughtlessness and stupidity on GDPR, cookie management, other regulatory nonsense has been a bit of a learning for the EU. I hope so. And if not, I hope the UK, now not in the EU, can make independent decisions. But we'll see, because obviously we need to be aligned because there's 550 million of them right there. Heading back over the pond. So this is a Bloomberg article looking at how, basically goes into detail of how the S&P 500 gains, the era of those gains are over, a Goldman strategist says. So what's going on here? Is this the Magnificent Seven propping up, now no longer? What's the deal?
It's on the back of a very well-written, well-analyzed Goldman's research paper, effectively looking at a lot of different factors and saying, net on the back of this, kind of this incredible decade we've had of S&P 500 gains, of stock market gains are over, and we're going to see much, much lower returns over the coming decade. And they go through a vector after vector of why that is. And you point some of them out. It's the concentration in the S&P 500, where you've got kind of the Magnificent Seven. You've got these mega companies having such a concentration of market cap around them. It's to some extent the relatively high valuations compared to historical trends. It's a level of high profitability of companies already, where there's expectation of some mean reversion. So it's adding all of those things up, and they sort of say, look, we plug all of that into our big model, and it suggests to us that returns will go down. That means that investors should be looking elsewhere for returns. So that's sort of one angle. But they have a very, very interesting paragraph in the report saying, if AI comes good and enhances productivity in the way it could, that could dramatically improve the profitability of companies, which of course will flow through to earnings per share, which means that actually there could be bigger gains ahead as well. And one thing's for sure, for my money, I would not bet against the S&P 500 right now.
Yeah.
I think a slice of America, when you have AI being rolled out to enterprises everywhere, is probably a sensible part of any portfolio. So yeah, I just thought it was an interesting perspective.
It is an interesting perspective. I'm always keen to explore how this will affect Europe and what the knock-on effect of any kind of reduction in growth or any potential stagnation, or dare I say it, recession, what then happens. And we talk about sneezing, catching a cold, but where are we at in the cycle where, assuming Kamala wins, which we're going to come on to next, and Trump doesn't, I imagine there will be not as much excitement for commercial activity as there would be under Trump. So I'm just intrigued as to how this slowing, potential reversing would actually affect Europe. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think a lot is down to how well we are setting ourselves up to compete. We talk about relatively low European growth rates, but it was not always like that. Europe was absolutely bombed to pieces after the Second World War. And then there was a huge element of catching up. And European economies had periods over the last 60, 70 years when they grew very rapidly. But that is now, we're now seeing all these systemic issues I spoke about before. In many ways, we've been powered by this German export engine, this incredible manufacturing, and where automotive sort of is the centerpiece. And if that automotive sector comes under threat, it can threaten the full supply chain in machinery and tooling and kind of all the other things we're doing. For us to benefit from AI, we have to actually be competitive in the industries we are in. It's not going to help. If nobody wants to buy our cars, AI is not going to help us. So we have to have industries and products where we are world leading, and the AI will then enable us to be more efficient at making those products. And so if we can retain our leadership in some spaces, pharma medicine is maybe one of the few areas where we are truly, truly globally leading, then it could be a good thing. But kind of other sectors where you sort of traditionally see European strength, fashion, is that really a place where AI is going to have such a big impact? Maybe not. I think it's back to the article we spoke about before, kind of digital first, digital forward. We need to retool our economy to be more digitally native. We need to develop industries where we have leaderships in digital products. And then, from that, you could see those kind of business efficiency gains and therefore earnings per share gains and therefore stock market gains that we would love to see for European companies.
Maybe this is an opportunity for Europe. Let's move on to the next piece, which is another Noah Smith article. He was basically asking the question, how much damage can Trump do to the economy is in the broader sense. He talks about the three main economic policies that he has: mass deportation, high tariffs on China, and very large tax cuts for the rich. So they are going to be debt and inflationary triggering. But what else is coming out of here for you?
I think you're spot on in pulling those out. Actually, I was putting that up and maybe just save it for us to discuss on the 5th, the day of the election. Now, my expectations are, on current polling, that Trump will win. And so I think the question is, what will happen? And the challenge is, there's been a strength we've seen in the business community. I think many people have been a little bit worried about some of the things Kamala has said and done, and there are concerns around kind of the immigration policy that's been implemented. But what we know is that kind of all the immigrants that have come to the U.S., they've helped keep labor costs down. And so what Trump is proposing is, as you say, it's a reduction in immigration, which is going to put pressure on wages, which is going to fuel inflation. It's a massive expansion of the fiscal deficit in the form of tax cuts, which is going to put pressure on interest rates. And then inflation itself will put pressure on interest rates. And so could this lead to a reversal of the downward trajectory we are seeing for interest rates right now. And it's clear that if it does, that will be extremely detrimental, not just to the US economy, but to the global economy.
Yeah.
So I think this is, and is Trump going to do these things if he gets back into
He's
office?
not going to win. I'm not having it. He's not going to win.
Okay, let's play with the idea that he might. Is he going to do it? I'm not sure he will, because I think that the policies he's proposing are so damaging, and I think people will work it out, and I think he eventually will work that out. I think to some extent he is saying right now what people want to hear, as opposed to what he will
posturing.
do. But if he ends up doing it, it could be a real issue.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we're VCs, right? So we're always going to look at the opportunities. Whichever way, up, down, left, right, there will be a startup to solve that problem. Lovely, my man. What a gift. I will catch you next week.
All right. See you next time.